There is a warning about silver right now that almost nobody wants to say out loud. And the reason they do not want to say it is that it costs them nothing when you get it wrong. The big banks, the trading desks, the financial channels that treat silver as a ticker to be flipped instead of a thing you can hold in your hand, they are perfectly happy to let you buy silver. They will sell you all the silver you want. What they will never tell you is that the silver they are selling you and the silver you think you are buying may not be the same thing at all. If you own silver right now, or you are thinking about it to protect your retirement, this is the warning that matters more than any price target you will ever hear. Because the danger is not that silver goes down for a while. The danger is that you believe you own the metal, when what you actually own is a promise, a claim, a piece of paper with somebody else's signature on it. And in the moment you most need that metal to be real, you may find out it was never yours to begin with. Stay with me, because by the end, you will understand the one distinction the whole game turns on, and why the people who profit from your confusion have every reason to keep you confused. So let me give you the fact that started all of this for me, the thing you can chew on right now. In the paper silver market, there are far more ounces owed on paper than there are ounces of real metal sitting in a vault to back them, many multiples more. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is just how the market is built. For every real ounce that exists, a stack of paper claims to that same ounce trades hands every single day. And as long as almost nobody asks to actually take their metal home, the machine runs smoothly. The problem only shows up when people do ask, when the door gets crowded. I want to take you back to something you probably remember, because it is the clearest lesson the modern market has ever handed us, and almost everybody drew exactly the wrong conclusion from it. A few years ago, a wave of ordinary people online decided they were going to squeeze the silver market. It became a movement. Regular folks, not hedge funds, not insiders, deciding together that they were going to force the price up by buying silver all at once. The energy was real. The anger at Wall Street was real. And for a few days, it looked like it might actually work. And then it did not. It fizzled. The price gave a little jolt, and then it faded. And a lot of good people who had put real money in walked away feeling foolish, feeling like the game was rigged against them. Here is what almost none of them understood, and what I want you to understand, because this is the whole warning in one story. Most of them were not buying silver. They were buying paper claims to silver. They were pouring money into funds and contracts and account entries, and every dollar that went in got answered by the machine issuing more paper. You cannot squeeze a market by feeding it more of the very thing it can print at will. Think about what that means. They walked up to the wrong door entirely. They thought they were storming the vault, and instead they were standing in line at a counter where the man behind it can write a new claim ticket every time you hand him a dollar. The real vault, the physical metal, the coins and the bars that somebody actually has to dig out of the ground and refine and ship, that door was around the corner, and hardly anybody used it. The tiny number who did buy real coins and real bars, they found something interesting. The premiums on physical metal shot up. The dealers ran dry. Real silver got genuinely hard to find and expensive to get, even while the paper price barely twitched. That gap, that split between what the metal cost and what the paper said the metal cost, that gap was the entire lesson, and the financial media walked right past it. Now, why does this matter so much for you, sitting on a retirement account you spent 40 years building? Because the exact same trick is being run on a much larger and much quieter scale, and you may be standing on the wrong side of that door without knowing it. When you buy silver inside most ordinary brokerage products, you are very often not buying metal. You are buying an entry in a system, a claim. And that claim is only as good as the institution behind it, and the assumption that you and everyone else will never all ask for the real thing at the same time. Let me be very plain about the mechanism, because this is where the banks go quiet. On the futures exchange, silver is priced by contracts, and the number of ounces represented by all those open contracts dwarfs the amount of deliverable metal actually sitting there ready to hand over. It works because almost every contract gets settled in cash or rolled forward. Almost nobody stands for delivery. Almost nobody says, "No, thank you. I do not want the cash. I want the bars." The system is designed around the assumption that you will always take the paper. And that assumption is the soft spot. That is the thing that does not want to be looked at too closely. We have watched what happens when the exchange gets nervous. Back in 2011, when silver ran up toward its old ceiling near $50, the exchange did something that had nothing to do with supply or demand or the metal itself. It raised the cost of holding a position over and over in a matter of days. It made it more expensive to simply keep your bet on the table. And silver fell something like 30% in a handful of sessions, even though not 1 ounce more had come out of the ground and not one factory had stopped needing it. Understand what that tells you. They can move the price of the paper by changing the rules of the paper. They cannot change the amount of real metal that exists. The metal does not care about a rule change. The paper is entirely at the mercy of one. And while the paper game plays out on the screen, the real world is doing something the paper price keeps ignoring. Silver has run a supply deficit for several years now, meaning the world uses more of it than the mines pull out, year after year, drawing down the above-ground stockpiles to cover the difference. And here is the part that makes silver different from gold. Gold gets hoarded. Almost every ounce ever mined still exists somewhere, in a vault, in a ring, in a coin. Silver gets burned. It goes into solar panels and electronics and medical devices in tiny amounts, a fraction of a gram here, a sliver there, dispersed and spread so thin across so many products that it is almost never worth recovering. It gets used up and thrown away. So the real physical silver in the world is quietly getting scarcer, even as the paper claims on it multiply. Sit with that for a second. More and more paper promises stacked on top of less and less actual metal. That is not a stable arrangement. That is a spring being wound. And that is the difference that this entire video is about. This is the warning nobody wants to hear. It is not a warning about the price. It is a warning about what you actually own. Because in a calm market, paper silver and real silver track each other closely enough that the distinction feels academic. It feels like splitting hairs. Who cares whether it is a bar in a vault or a line in an account? They move together, right? And that is true, right up until the one day it is not. And on that day, the day it actually matters, the day everyone reaches for what they thought they had, the paper and the metal go their separate ways, and only one of them was ever really yours. I want to pause here, because if you are feeling that quiet knot in your stomach, the one that says, wait, what do I actually own? Then you are exactly the person I made this for, and I do not want to leave you standing in that worry without a door to walk through. Here is something the biggest and most sophisticated buyers on Earth have already figured out. The central banks, the national treasuries. For 3 straight years now, they have been buying physical gold at a pace we have not seen in generations, well above what they bought in the decade before. And they are not buying paper claims and account entries. They are buying bars and putting them in their own vaults. There is a reason a central bank wants the metal in its own hands and not a promise from someone else. Gold in your own vault cannot be frozen, cannot be defaulted on, cannot be printed away. They learned that lesson the hard way in recent years, and they acted on it. And here is what almost nobody tells the ordinary retiree. There is a perfectly legal way for you to do the very same thing they are doing inside the retirement account you already have. You can move a portion of your 401k or your IRA into real, physical gold and silver held in a depository in your name, without triggering taxes and without triggering penalties, using what is called a self-directed precious metals IRA. This is not some exotic loophole for insiders. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, this is available to you. The same physical metal protection the central banks are using in a structure the IRS already recognizes. So if any part of this warning is landing, pause the video and get the information. If you're watching this on your television, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. Get the free guide, learn how it works, and then come right back, because the rest of this is the part that actually changes how you think about it. Now let me widen the lens, because this paper versus metal problem is not new and it is not small. It is the oldest tension in the whole history of money. There have been moments, again and again across history, where a system of paper claims was built on top of a much smaller pile of real metal, and everyone agreed to pretend the claims and the metal were the same thing. And it always worked, beautifully, until confidence cracked. Once, a group of nations pooled their reserves and spent them defending a fixed price for gold, promising the paper was as good as the metal, and they held that line until one day they simply could not. and they abandoned it overnight, and the price they had defended for years came apart in an instant. The paper had been a promise all along. The metal had been the only truth in the room the entire time. That is the pattern. Paper promises hold until the moment people demand the metal, and in that moment the difference between the two becomes the only thing that matters in the world. And this is where I have to be honest with you about something the cheerleaders will not say. Silver is volatile. It swings hard. It has touched that ceiling near $50 twice in the last few decades and been knocked back down both times. And the base it has been building underneath is many decades long. Anyone who tells you silver only goes up is lying to you. And lying to a retiree about volatility is close to unforgivable. So this is not me promising you a price. This is a case, not a guarantee, and it is not personal financial advice. What I am telling you is about ownership, about which side of that door you are standing on when the volatility comes, because it will come. And here is why the ownership question is the one that actually protects you through the volatility. If you own real metal, sized correctly, held in your own name, then a violent swing in the price is something you can sit through. It cannot force your hand. Nobody can raise the cost of holding your coins until you have to sell. Nobody can change a margin rule and squeeze you out of a bar you already paid for and already possess. The metal just sits there being metal. But if what you own is paper, leverage, a claim inside somebody else's system, then that same swing can wipe you out precisely when you were right, because you got shaken loose before the story finished playing out. That is the cruelty of it. The paper holders often get proven right and get nothing for it, because they did not survive the shakeout. The metal holders just wait. Let me tell you about a saver I want you to picture, because I think he is a lot of you. A man who did everything the responsible way. Worked, saved, put money aside for decades, watched the news, got worried about the dollar and about inflation, and decided he was going to protect himself with silver. Good instinct. Exactly the right instinct. But he did it the easy way, the way the app made simple, the way the ads pushed him toward. He bought paper silver in a brokerage account, watched a number go up and down on a screen, and told himself he owned silver. And in the calm years, he did fine, and he felt smart. What he never asked, because nobody ever prompted him to ask, was the only question that mattered. If everyone reached for the real thing at once, would there be a bar with his name on it? There would not have been. He owned a place in line, not a piece of metal. He had the right idea and the wrong door. Now here is the part one have been saving, the part that ties this whole thing together, and it is about timing. Because you might be thinking, all right, but the crowded door, the day everyone reaches for the metal at once, that has not happened. And you are right, it has not. And that is exactly the point. That is the whole point. The smart money, the central banks, the people who move quietly and early, they are already through that physical door and standing in the vault. They are not waiting for the crisis to teach them the difference between paper and metal. They already know it, and they are positioned. The mainstream, the pension funds, the financial channels, your neighbor, they have not caught on. To them, silver is still just a ticker, and paper is still just as good as metal. And it will stay that way, right up until the moment it very suddenly is not. And by the time it becomes obvious, by the time the difference between paper and metal is leading every news segment and every advisor is suddenly telling you to get the real thing, the easy part will already be behind us. The premiums will already be sky high. The coins will already be hard to find. The window where you could calmly, cheaply, quietly move to the right side of the door, that window is open precisely when nothing feels urgent, which is right now. Nobody is going to call you and tell you to walk through it. Nobody sends you an invitation to be early. Being early is lonely, and it feels unnecessary. And that is exactly why it works, and exactly why so few people do it. The crowd only shows up after the easy part is gone, and by then, the right door is the one with the line out front. So let me bring this all the way back to where we started and answer the warning honestly. The silver warning nobody wants to hear is not that the price is about to crash, and it is not that the price is about to soar. It is simpler and more important than either. It is this: know what you actually own. If your silver is a promise inside somebody else's system, then you do not own silver. You own their willingness to make good on paper. And history is very clear about how that ends when everyone asks at once. If your silver is metal, real, physical, holding your name, sized so no swing can force you to sell, then you own the one thing on that entire battlefield that cannot be printed, defaulted, or frozen. Same word, silver. Two completely different things, and the whole warning leaves in that gap. If you have watched this far, you already understand more than almost anyone you know. And I want to help you act on it while it is still calm and still cheap and still entirely your decision. For those of you with $100,000 or more in a retirement account, I hold a free one-on-one educational web content. No obligation, no pressure, just a real conversation about how this works and whether the physical metal approach even fits your situation. It is only for people who watch to the end and mention that they did, because those are the people who actually understand why the ownership question matters. If you are on your television, scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffwadeguide.com. Do it now, while the door is uncrowded, because the whole lesson of that failed squeeze, the whole lesson of this warning, is that the time to make sure the metal is really yours is long before everybody else comes looking for theirs. Walk through the right door and do it further.